Let's get more on this from women's rights advocate Evon Benson-Idahosa. Nigeria is one of the countries striving to achieve gender equality by the year 2030. How would you assess our journey so far?
I think I would say that overall, right, we've come a long way, but we're definitely not where we should be. I think when it comes to the issue of gender inequality, of women's empowerment, those remain part of the unfinished agenda of our time. I think when we look at some of the most pressing issues that women are facing globally, we see that Nigeria continues to struggle. We are consistently within the top 10% of countries worldwide that exhibit the highest levels of discrimination against women. And that's regardless of whether we're talking about women in governance, whether we're talking about women's access to justice, access to education, protection from violence. Nigeria consistently ranks lower than we should. And to a certain extent, I think that is because there is some intentionality that ensures that women are disempowered in the system itself, right? And that's reflected in our laws, in our traditions, it's seen in our customs, right? And so I think until we get to the point where all of us collectively, men included, repudiate this idea of patriarchy, right? Because really that's what's tying everything together. Until we get to that point, I fear that we will continue to, as you say, struggle in some of these areas. But I think as an optimist, I'm excited about the fact that in recent times, we've seen more men creating more space for women at the table, including their voices in leadership decisions as well. And so I think for that reason, I'm excited about what the future potentially holds for Nigeria.
According to a 2018 IMF report, Nigeria suffers from widespread gender inequality and is therefore missing out on a key ingredient to economic success. How do you suggest we address this?
Well, I think the reality is that gender equality has been linked to better development outcomes overall, right? We see that reflected in higher GDP, higher productivity, as well as faster economic growth overall, right? So what happens when there is a lack of women's voices and inclusions in these spaces is the exact opposite, right? Women have been proven to invest a larger proportion of their income back into their household, back into their communities, and into the education of their children. We know that when women's voices are included, we have a different perspective, particularly when it comes to governance, and certainly in the labor force, and that results in a diversification, right, of output. And so I think at the end of the day, it actually serves us, right, to ensure that women's voices are included in governance, that women are economically empowered, that we have policies that take a gendered lens, particularly when it comes to the issue of education and healthcare. At the end of the day, we know that these things ultimately make women better. They advance women. But the truth of the matter is that the liberation of women is actually the liberation of men. It's the liberation of Nigeria as a whole.
There's a school of thought which suggests that poverty is a gender issue, and if poverty can be eradicated or drastically reduced in Nigeria, then it will be easy to achieve gender equality. Do you agree with this? And what's the connection between both thoughts?
I think I agree to the extent that any initiative, right, that improves the lives of women, that improves the lives of people in general, right, should be applauded. But there is a link, right, between gender and poverty and economic equality, because women do tend to be lower paid. Women do tend to do more unpaid work, and women can often be undervalued, right, when it comes to the work that they put in the labor force. Statistically speaking, right, globally, we know that women generally earn about 24% less than men. And I think at that rate, it will take us about 170 years, right, to close the gender pay gap. 75% of women in the developing world tend to work in the informal sector, right? And so we know that makes it harder to break out of poverty. Women also tend to do anywhere from 2 to 10 times the amount of household work that men do, which is generally unpaid, right? And women, as a result of that, women tend to work longer hours, an average of 4 years over the lifetime compared to men. And so We see that certainly there is a correlation, but alleviating poverty alone is not going to fix the issue. We need to start to dismantle some of the things I spoke about earlier, namely patriarchy, violence against women, and the systems that allow for those things to continue to proliferate.
There seems to be some confusion as to what exactly gender equality means. Some people see it as women striving to dominate the men. What is your take on this?
Well, I think that the term itself has been misunderstood on several levels and in many different ways, right? It's not about dominating men. It's not about removing men from the equation. I certainly have no interest in doing that. I think we all work collectively better together, right? But the truth of the matter is that the bodies of African women, including Nigerian women, are some of the most weaponized in the world. They're certainly some of the most legislated upon, and certainly some of the most disempowered, right, in many ways. And so for me, it's not just about speaking truth to power, and I certainly do that when I have the occasion and the need to, right, but it's also about empowering the voices of the seemingly powerless, right? So for women particularly, right, ensuring that they understand who they are, the power that they bring to the table, and that generally equates, right, to women having equal access to jobs, equal access to opportunities, regardless of their gender.